Good evening. The Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, Wednesday, April 6, 2022 is called to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the Secretary note the roll?
Thank you. Commissioner Sambito is present. Commissioner Wang is present. Commissioner Hamilton is present. Commissioner Hegedus is present. Commissioner Booth is present. Vice Chairman Clymer should be on the phone, and Chairman Kish is present. We have a quorum, and he is on the line.
All right. Are you there, Mr. Clymer? A seance. All right. Item number 1 is to approve the draft minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission held on March 16, 2022. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes March 16th.
I have a motion from Commissioner Hamilton. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second from Commissioner Hegedus. All opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick point of order. Be sure to press the button on your microphones when you're speaking. When the light turns green at the base, it's on, and when the light turns red at the base, it is inactive.
Bring it closer to myself. Now it's time for citizens who would like to address the Planning and Zoning Commission on any non-agenda items. Do we have any speaker cards? Does anyone in the audience wish to address on any non-agenda item? This is the opportunity for commission members to disclose any ex parte communications that they may have had prior to this meeting on any scheduled discussion on this agenda. Are there any ex parte communications? Seeing none. Move on to agenda item number 2 is the Ballpark Village minor general plan amendment, and I'll open the public hearing. Senior Planner Christian will present.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to present this item and the following item as one presentation, if I may do so.
Excellent.
Great. Good evening, Chairman Kish and Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm glad we didn't scare you away and you're back for some more. I'm here before you this evening with 2 requests from Ed Bull. One is to conduct a minor general plan amendment on 121 acres of property within the city, and the other is to conduct a rezoning subsequent to that on 156 acres of property within the city. The minor general plan amendment case is called Ballpark Village Northeast Area, and the rezoning case, if that is approved, is called Fulton Homes at Ballpark Village. The overall property we will be discussing today is approximately 156 acres and is located in central Goodyear in Ballpark Village on the southeast corner of Estrella Parkway and Yuma Road. The property is within 2 general plan land use categories, one being neighborhood and the other being business and commerce. And I'll touch on that and where those are located on an upcoming slide. The property is currently zoned within 2 PADs as well, planned area developments. And the point of this zoning case would combine those into one for a rezoning called Fulton Homes at Ballpark Village. And the general plan amendment would modify the general plan land uses to be consistent with one another. So zooming in a little closer to the overall 156 acres, it's an L-shaped parcel. The parcel is south of the Centera neighborhood, which is the Lunaire apartments and some single-family developments being constructed today. It is north of the city's ballpark and the ballpark parking, as well as a vacant parcel that is currently being farmed. It is west of the city-owned Bullard Wash, as well as the case you'll be familiar with. This is Anton at Ballpark Village, which you all rezoned recommended rezoning for at the last meeting, and council agreed and rezoned it as well. And it is east of a vacant parcel which is currently being farmed for the southwest Goodyear City Center southwest corner. As a note, I will note that you do see the airport here. This property does not fall within the DNL or the noise area of that airport. To remind you of this property's context within Greater Ballpark Village area, I'll show you this map. As you recall at the last meeting, you rezoned this parcel here. This parcel was zoned a couple years ago, and it's being graded today. And in the next coming months, you'll see another case up here. The property we're talking about today is this piece right here. For some history on the zoning of this property and the immediate area adjacent to it, in 2006, through an ordinance, the eastern 121 acres of this property was zoned City Center Air Park Planned Area Development. The underlying land uses for that PAD designation were commercial and industrial. In 2007, the Goodyear Ballpark in Ballpark Village was first zoned adjacent to this site. Subsequently, the ballpark was constructed, and we had a great season this year. And in 2008, through an ordinance, the western 35 acres of this site was zoned City Center, Goodyear City Center Southeast Planned Area Development, and the underlying zoning district or development districts for this property were business park and retail. And if you will recall, the Anton case from last week actually occupied this portion of the property. Today, we're talking about this portion. In 2020 or 2021, in response to new developments developers being interested in this area of the city and City Hall being relocated north of Interstate 10, a major general plan amendment occurred in December of 2021, and the former city center overlay, which encompassed this area, was removed and replaced with neighborhoods in this section and business and commerce in this section. So the western 35 acres of the site is currently in the neighborhood district or land use district. There's also a village center overlay on that site. The western 121 acres is still designated business and commerce within the general plan. Going a little bit more into that request, so the first request of this applicant is a minor general plan amendment for Ballpark Village Northeast area. That is this area here. This is the eastern 121 acres. So today, on the general plan land use map, you can see that that property is business and commerce. The property that was recently modified from city center is neighborhoods. So the desire of this developer is to bring their entire 156 acres into the neighborhoods category so that they can construct a cohesive master plan community. So they want to change the designation. The second thing they would like to do is, in order to develop a cohesive master plan community, they request the removal of Goodyear Boulevard East, south of Yuma Road, and north of Goodyear Boulevard South. That is this road you see here that's dashed. It doesn't exist today in whole. They request to remove that from the general plan land use and transportation map. And we will talk about some mitigating factors of that on an upcoming slide. And finally, as a result of city center arterial loops not being needed in order to serve that former designated area of city center, the request also is to modify Goodyear Boulevard North in this section between Estrella Parkway and Goodyear Boulevard East or Centera Drive as other streets, Goodyear Boulevard East between Goodyear Boulevard North, Centera Drive, and Yuma Road as other streets, Goodyear Boulevard South between Wood and 157th or Goodyear Boulevard West as other streets, and Goodyear Boulevard West between Yuma and 157th as other streets. It does leave the northwest quarter of Goodyear Boulevard East as city center arterial loops because the city retains property there. We have a high school, an elementary school, and a park. So until those final land use plans are more prevalent, we're going to retain that. As it relates to Goodyear Boulevard East, and this is, I apologize. I will come back to the mitigating factors on another slide. So now moving into the zoning case. If the minor general plan amendment is approved, the applicant will seek to rezone the property into a single planned area development called Fulton Homes at Ballpark Village. The 156-acre site will be a cohesive planned area development, and unlike our case last week, which was hard zoned MF24, which is a zoning district, with a PAD overlay to address those modifications, this development will be its own zoning district, which is PAD. So whenever you see a PAD come before you, means it's its own zoning district. And the details of that zoning district are defined within the planned area development document. So this development proposes to be a gated master plan community with 4 housing types. The R50 and R52 housing types are going to be very similar to our R16 reduced standards, but will contain modifications in this PAD. The R45 product, which is most similar to the city's R14 reduced, but contains modifications, and the R35 product, which is most similar to our R1C product. It's an alley-loaded product, but contains some modifications based on that. The R50 will be 50 foot wide by 120 feet deep. The R52 will be 52 feet wide by 100 feet deep. The R45 will be 45 by 90, and the R35 will be 35 by 110 alley loaded. The PAD codifies lot diversity by stating that a minimum of 15% of the lots within this development will be R50. 15% at minimum will be R52. A minimum of 25% of the lots will be R45. And a minimum of 25% of the lots will be R35. And for any math whizzes out there, that doesn't equal 100. So the remnant 20% can be utilized in any category. The point here is diversity in a mixture of lots, not one single lot type. And the percentages gives flexibility for placement so that the neighborhood looks unique and feels a little bit, has more character. So the image on the right shows you an example of what that might look like to satisfy that mix of requirements. I will point out that the mixed requirements in the map that you see on the right is not what we're voting on tonight. We're voting on the land use and the PAD. This is just conceptual in nature. You'll see the finalized map similar to this come before you with the preliminary plat. So now let's discuss some additional details of the PAD. So as stated in the previous meeting, the vision for this ballpark area, or ballpark village, is walkable village, and the individual developments within it feel uniquely cohesive despite being made up of a dozen or so developments. While the majority of the communities in Goodyear are completely surrounded by solid walls, similarly to the Anton case, the goal of this development is to have views into the community while balancing the privacy of those individual residents. The conceptual map above illustrates this. A majority of the walls along Wood Boulevard must be partial view or full view fencing. On Lower Buckeye Parkway, which is down here, and let me tell you what the colors are. Blue is solid, purple is partial view, and this yellow is it's a full view fence, if you will. On Lower Buckeye Parkway, a minimum of 40% of the fencing should be view fencing or partial view. A minimum of 20% of the lots along Estrella and Yuma must side on to the streets of the neighborhood. Again, that's for a street appeal, so you don't have all backyard walls along it. There's some changes in the angle of those. A minimum of 50% of the lots along Estrella Parkway should have view fencing. A minimum of 35% of the lots along Yuma should have view fencing. And this provides, again, for peeks into the development, so you can see the architecture and character of those homes. And again, this is a conceptual of what that might look like in order to provide some of those peeks into the neighborhood to see the character of the homes, while also having some privacy for those homes. You'll notice right here there is planned to be a large block wall, but again, this is a parking field with some unknowns behind it, so that was not codified in the zoning. And then walkability is also important, as well as street character. The development is required to have small blocks. That's why you'll see a lot of these are small square blocks. From the example, you'll see that there's no cul-de-sacs, and the smaller blocks make it feel more urban-like and more like a village. And even though this development is gated, there's a desire for their residents to have easy and convenient access out of the development so they can walk to the future retail in Ballpark Village enjoy the trails, the ballpark, and the neighbors in those adjacent residential communities. So a minimum of 5 pedestrian connections are required to Estrella, Yuma, and Lower Buckeye, total of 5 minimum. 3 are required to the Bullard Wash, and 2 are required to Wood Avenue for a total of 10. And this example shows these arrows where conceptually residents can walk out, go to the ballpark and the future retail there, or walk out to the trail. For amenities and streetscape elements, the development will have 3 major park areas: north, central, and south. Minimum amenities are defined in the PAD, but to give you an example, the north amenity park will include an aquatic center with lap lanes, a leisure pool, a kids play pool, pool buildings and restrooms, pool ramadas with shaded lounge seating areas, shaded tot lots, gathering ramadas with picnics areas, barbecue grills, plaza areas, bocce ball courts, cornhole areas, and multi-use turf areas. The other 2 parks also have a long list of amenities, which I won't read out to you today, but they're very similar in nature to the North Park with the exception of the pool. The pool is the big amenity for the entire community. For streetscape elements, the developer will need a various level of amenities to support the diverse lot sizes within the community. The requirements are based on the city standards comparable to the reduced standards in our zoning ordinance. About those, remember the districts I told you they're comparable to like R14 reduced? That's what those standards are based on. So by way of example, in order to build their R45 product, the developer will need to build a minimum of 5 of the following: detached sidewalks with at least 1 tree between the sidewalk and the house, paver driveways on all the homes, park-lined streets, parks with lined streets that have on-street parking spaces. You'll see that in the image here as an example. Enhanced entry roads into the development, pre-plotted houses to maximize the diversity of the elevations, the construction of the Bullard Wash Trail on the city-owned property adjacent to this property, and the construction of Ballpark Village monuments on the southeast corner of Estrella Parkway and Yuma Road. So for them to do their R45 product, which they have a minimum requirement to do so, they'll need to do at least 5 of those items that I listed. I will point out 3 of those items just to highlight them. The developer intends to, and this isn't actually in that requirement, but the developer intends to utilize bright and primary-like colors on the base of the homes to add some vibrancy to this community so that we're not having houses that are all gray, gray or grayest, or tan, tan or tannest. This will feel like a different part of Goodyear and add some vibrancy there. The developer in the zoning has agreed to build the public DG trail in the Bullard Wash on the west side in the city property, which the city does not have currently budgeted today, and that trail would be then dedicated to the city for the enjoyment of not only these residents, but all residents in this community. So again, if you're on the Anton side and this side, you do a nice little loop there until the trail connects northward. And finally, the developer was very familiar with the former city center plan. Thus, they incorporated many of those walkable elements, those visual elements into this development to provide for a continuity and a sense of community. They particularly remembered the former mayor and the city center committee members working on theming at the 4 corners of city center. To pay tribute to that work, they've worked to incorporate the theme of that plan into the southeast corner at Estrella and Yuma. That theme was actually rock and vegetation. So they will be incorporating that theme into the mural that they place into the Ballpark Village Monument, as well as the landscaping in front of that monument. Again, to pay tribute to the work that that committee did. I know this question always comes up, so I want to jump out of this case really quick, just go a little bit larger, and I want to quickly touch on retail because I know we all want retail in this area. So in Ballpark Village, immediately adjacent to this site, there are 60 acres today zoned for commercial, entertainment, mixed-use type uses. Those are entitled right now. 52 acres right now are zoned there. And then in likely next month, you're going to hear another case just north of this site for an additional 7 acres. So you might ask, well, how big is 52 acres? Is that big enough? And can we get the things we want in there? For comparison, Westgate, the core area where the fountain is, the yard house, the movie theater, all that, without the parking, that's 13 acres. You add all the privately held parking in that area, that's 59 acres. So that's right about this. If you add Park West at 99th and Northern, which is where Grimaldi's and all that is, if you take out the apartments, that's 47 acres. And if you talk about Tanger Outlets and parking, that's 37 acres. If you talk about Scottsdale Quarter, one of my favorite places, that's 28 acres. So this development alone right by Ballpark Village is 53 acres, and likely next month you'll hear a case for an additional 7 acres of retail opportunity in the area. Additionally, when you hear the Ballpark Village case, you're going to see So, and for any of the retail developers listening out here, this Ballpark Village area has entitled and will likely have entitled 4,200 units of residential, which can easily walk to and support the retail in the area. And we're very hungry for that retail. So just want you to know that the trade area is rapidly expanding and we're ready for retail and we have lots of opportunity. And that doesn't count even Hudson Commons, Estrella Commons, those Centera, doesn't count that, 4,200 units. So hope the developers are listening. Quickly, let me touch on Goodyear Boulevard East and what happens if we remove this from the land use plan. As part of the subsequent of this zoning case, the developer has agreed that they will remove the existing stub portion of Goodyear Boulevard East that doesn't go anywhere, and they will landscape that when it's abandoned to the city. A portion of that will be abandoned into the development and be incorporated into the development. The other portion will be abandoned back to us as the property owner. So you won't just have a random street hanging out there in indefinites. So to date, the city has not received any resident opposition to this case, only general quals and inquiries. Staff has evaluated the impacts of the minor general plan amendment and proposed zoning to the greater community. And with no major concerns being found, staff recommends you forward an approval recommendation to cause a minor amendment to the general plan and transportation plan. It subsequently rezoned the property from 2 planned area developments with an underlying zoning of commercial, industrial, business, park, and retail to Fulton Homes at Ballpark Village planned area development, subject to the staff stipulations. I do have a few modifications on stipulations I would like you to consider if you do recommend approval. I would request that references to the area development should be planned area development, and stipulation 23 should read, i.e. 2/3 the cost of the signal at West Lower Buckeye Parkway and South Bullard Avenue, and 3/4 of the cost of the full traffic signal at the intersection of West Lower Buckeye Parkway and Southwood Boulevard, and 1/2 the cost of the intersection of West Yuma Road and Goodyear Boulevard East. To summarize what that means, because you're like, what am I even talking about? Basically, if they have to build the signal first, they would only be supposed to contribute a certain percentage to that signal. So if they have to build it first, as their development is in first, there's some reimbursement mechanisms for them to receive extra funds from the other developers when they come in. Of note, speaking of signals, this development contemplates improvements to Estrella Parkway. Right now it's 2 lanes, it'll go to 3 lanes. Yuma Road, right now it's 2 and 1 lane, it'll go to 3 lanes. Contributions to the signal at Lower Buckeye and Bullard, Lower Buckeye and Wood, and Goodyear Boulevard East at Yuma Road, and additional modifications to the signal at Estrella Parkway and Yuma Road. With that, that's the end of my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions you might have about the zoning. The applicant I know is here as well. They don't have a formal presentation, but they're always happy to help.
Thank you, Christian. That was really thorough. I really appreciated the giving us context on the space and how we size up against other projects in the West Valley, because that was actually really helpful. Are there any questions for staff?
I just had one question. I appreciate the effort, Christian, to go into all the detail. Go back to that 20%. I understand when we come back and look at the project, I don't know, in a few months here, will they tell us then? Because it looked like the exhibit was fairly planned out, or is that something that occurs as they're building?
Yes, the reason we provided the flexibility actually is in case something comes up with from a land use planning, a drainage plan, or anything like that. If we set hard and fast numbers of lots that are the certain size, then we might have to come back and do this all over again if we need to tweak 2 lots or 3 lots. So the point here was that we provide the development community with a little bit of flexibility so that we don't have to do an entire rezoning case because they find out that, you know, they need to do something with drainage or whatnot.
Great, thank you. I also have to say I really appreciate the open fencing and how it was laid out. I went back and looked at that again, and I drove up and down Estrella and on Indian School. I'm really going to like that. That's going to look great. I really appreciate it.
And I want to just say thank you for the email and the call, because when you ask those types of questions and give us a heads up, we can make sure our presentation is thorough. So I really appreciate that.
Vice Chairman Clymer, do you have any questions?
No comments. Thank you, Christian.
I got a question about the
the color scheme and the vibrant colors, and you probably all appreciate not having all more tans and grays, but there will be a color scheme and a palette that's chosen, so they can't just, the homeowners association will have chosen colors that are appropriate for their, correct?
Yes.
I did notice at the back of the applicant's packet that there was colors on there.
Yes.
Are they similar, or are they going to be more vibrant even than that?
That's what they're planning on incorporating.
The
Yes.
ones that we saw there?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions? Would the applicant like to address the commission?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commission, Ed Bull. I'm here this evening with Norm Nichols, who's the president of Fulton Homes, and also with Chris Webb from Rose Law. Many of you I've known for a long time. Some of these dates that Christian put up on the screen of when we were working on the city center or working on other things, that's been a while. A little water's gone under the bridge since then. I think you're all familiar with Fulton Homes. They're certainly no stranger to the city of Goodyear, no stranger to the valley. They've been in business about 45 years. They build about 35,000 homes, and they build good homes. We've had the opportunity to work with Norm and Fulton on lots of different developments, and they've been on the front edge of some of the creative, diverse, integrated master plan designs that Christian was talking about. I agree with every word that Christian said. Appreciate his thorough presentation, both in his staff reports and here this evening. All 30 stipulations are acceptable to us. If you want a presentation or more information from us, I'll be happy to provide it. But your chairman and others taught me a long time ago, the less I say, the less I screw up. So I'll be happy to sit down anytime you say you're happy. If you want a presentation, great. If not, if you're good, we're good.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
No.
You get off easy tonight.
We'll see. I haven't heard you vote yet, so.
Are there any speaker cards on this matter? And not seeing anyone who would like to speak on this. I will close the public hearing. And just question for staff. Am I going to have, we're talking about item number 21-700-00002 and 21-200-00013 in this, but we're going to have two separate votings, obviously. Okay, but
Correct.
that presentation was on both.
So what you'll do is essentially you'll have to run through the public hearing for the rezone as well.
Okay,
But we've already had a staff presentation, so the votes will be separate public hearings.
awesome. All right. May I have a motion and a second on item number 21-700-00002?
I motion to approve the request for a management release of a plan amendment.
I have a motion from Commissioner Booth, and I have a second.
A second?
I second.
I have a second from Commissioner Sambito and also Vice Chairman Clymer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. Agenda item number 3, which we will go through these motions, is the Fulton Homes at Ballpark Village rezone. I'm going to open the public hearing. Are there any speaker cards on this item? No. I'm going to close the public hearing. And may I have a motion and a second on item number 21-200-00013?
A motion to approve item 21-200-00013.
I have a motion from Commissioner Hegedus. Do I have a second? A second from Commissioner Hamilton. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 4 is the use permit for Chipotle. Open the public hearing. Planning Manager Steve will give his presentation.
Well, good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. Have a drive-through restaurant for you tonight. Request for use permit. Where we are located, it's the Canyon Trails Town Center. So we have Cotton Lane, Yuma Road would be down here, Canyon Trails Boulevard. This is that large center along the east side of Cotton Lane, anchored by the Super Target. And where we're proposed tonight is a little over an acre right here. So this would be the two banks right here, PetSmart and all that. So this lot right here. Access, as you can see, we've got a couple signals right here. So you can come in off of Canyon Trails Boulevard into the center. Restricted access here, full turning movements here. But the main drive out kind of wraps around here and then accesses this pad right there. Nearest residential is about 600 feet Canyon Trails across Cotton Lane to the west. And again, the center, Canyon Trails Town Center, it's about 90 acres. So a large commercial center, zoning approved in 2005. All for commercial uses, except for change here, change for multifamily. So this was a former Home Depot site, but is now will be developed for multifamily. And so this request, it's for a use permit. It's for the drive-through portion of the restaurant. Again, the parcel's a little over an acre. Site improvements all complete for this pad. Proposed building about a little over 2,300 square feet with indoor dining, and also have a 500 square foot outdoor patio. And so this was the site plan submitted with the use permit. So here's Cotton Lane, access onto that main drive where you'll wrap around in. All this parking field is completed, so it's really just the pads that are dirt right now that the developer will construct upon. So this is the Chipotle building right here. And so with this use, there are no menu boards or preview boards or such. All orders will be placed remotely. So you'll place your order, get your pickup time, and so you will just drive in and pick up your food and then leave the center here. Again, they'll also have indoor dining and that outdoor patio. And these are what the building will look like. Again, this center has approved colors, materials, and design. They incorporated the materials and colors into the center. So they grabbed some of the stone, the paint colors, some of the block, while also trying to giving some flexibility that they could allow some of their corporate architecture. But they did incorporate materials, colors, and most of the design into their building. And in looking at this use permit, the top two are the main things we look at. That it does not be material detrimental and that it'll fit in with what's already there. So given this is a commercial center, a lot of development already occurred. Also, several drive-throughs already in the center, so this proposed drive-through will be compatible with those. Traffic and queuing, all internalized to the site. Traffic study did not show any adverse impacts to our public streets. Queuing met the standard. They met the 5 cars from the first stop. Again, they don't have menu boards, but will be all remote ordering, so the pickup window was the first stop for our concerns and review. And again, no nearby residential. It's across Cotton Lane, 600 feet or so to the west. So we found the parcel adequate size. Again, the queuing would occur all on site. These are hours of operation. Again, given no residential nearby to be affected by noise or such, no recommended restriction on hours of operation. Off-site improvements, all of those are complete. Most of the center's improvements are complete. They'll just need to complete the improvements just for their pad site. And again, this is the use permit for the drive-through portion only of the restaurant. At this time, no other concerns. So for citizen review, we mailed a postcard to surrounding property owners. Haven't heard anything to date from that notice. Because this is a public hearing, we also put a legal ad in, posted the property, and also sent out a follow-up notice. Again, we haven't heard anything on this item. So we do find it meets our evaluation criteria. We are recommending approval subject to the 7 stipulations in the staff report. If approved tonight, it will head on to City Council at their April 18th hearing. With that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Would the applicant, go ahead.
So there's no menu, but this is all for pre-order. So no drive up and I'd like to order a burrito bowl or anything like that. Is that my understanding?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, yes. Usually we see some kind of order point before the pickup window. With this one, they call it their Chipotle concept. So it's all done remotely through their app, or I guess over your computer or phone normally. So you will place an order and then have a pickup time.
Vice Chairman Clymer, do you have any questions?
I do not, thank you.
Would the applicant like to address the commission? Is the applicant here? Guess not. Are there any speaker cards? All right. Close the public hearing. Can I have a motion and a second on item number 21-300-00013? Actually, hold on. Yeah, wait a minute.
I move approval of item 21-300-00013, use permit for a convenience use Chipotle Mexican Grill restaurant with drive-through.
I have a motion by Commissioner Zambito. Do I have a second?
A second.
I have a second from Commissioner Booth. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Steve is up again with item number 22-22220, a text amendment for use permits. I'm going to open the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, thank you. This will be an appropriate following to a drive-through is now a text amendment for drive-through restaurants. And so tonight's action before you is an actual change to our zoning code that is required to go before the commission and then through City Council for final approval. So tonight, that changes to the zoning ordinance, and that zoning ordinance regulates all land within the city. It's been around for a while, 1999. It's been amended several times since then, but it's in its current form, it's been with us for a while. One of the main parts we want to talk with you tonight about is the part of the zoning ordinance that sets the principal uses and use permit uses within the city for each zoning district. And some of those, the use permit uses, those require additional review as such as the before the Chipotle had to come before the commission and then go before the City Council. So the thought was, do all of those need to go before the commission and council through the public hearing process? Because that process can take from beginning to end about 4 to 6 months. So was there an opportunity to streamline the process for certain use permits? And so staff took this before the City Council in July to get their direction on this topic. And they did direct staff to look and offer flexibility for these types of drive-through restaurants. But they did have concerns with traffic and queuing. So they wanted to ensure that staff did look at those items. And so in looking at our code, there are several sections that apply to any change that we, or especially this change that we're looking to tonight. And just to go over real quick, I know there's a lot of information on some of these slides, but Article 1, that's our processes within the city. Article 2 sets forth a lot of definitions for us. Article 3, that establishes our zoning districts, our permitted uses, our use permit uses. Article 4, we've got some special uses in there, uses that could be appropriate but just need additional review. And then in looking at the use permits, that touches basically all of those articles I just mentioned. And so staff is the initiator behind this request based on council direction. To help us with this, we did solicit the help of outside counsel, Frank Cassidy, a longtime city attorney in Arizona. So he helped us basically doing probably 99.9% of the research and drafting of some of the standards that you see here tonight. And basically, the purpose is to forego use permit for certain drive-through restaurants. And the main criteria will be distance. So if that drive-through restaurant, if the drive-through lanes are more than 500 feet from residential, that drive-through restaurant will forego the use permit requirement. I'll touch on more of that in a little bit, but also we'll be looking at additions and modifications to our definitions. We'll need to revise some of the uses within our commercial districts, and we're going to establish some new development standards. And so in looking at this requirement, so this was Starbucks that came before us last month, and that was about 800 feet from Canyon Trails. So if this was coming in with this new provision, we would not need a use permit because all of their drive-through facilities would be further than 500 feet from residential. Contrasting that to Salad and Go proposed at Estrella Parkway and Van Buren, where you're only about 80 feet away from existing single-family rentals. So this Salad and Go would still have to go through the use permit process. And again, a lot of information here, which I probably can't read. So, but in looking at this, this is some of the definitions that will be needing to be revised to make this text amendment happen. So convenience uses, drive-through restaurants. Some of these are also just clarifications where we're saying drive-in restaurant and restaurant drive-in. They're basically the same thing. We've used them interchangeably throughout the ordinance. Sometimes it gets confusing, so we thought that it was a good time to also clear up some items within the code. And so the C1, that's our neighborhood commercial district. So we allowed drive-through restaurants to, that would be a permitted use, no use permit, as long as the drive-through facilities were more than 500 feet from residential. We also clarified the drive-in restaurants here, that if they're over 500 feet, then we still do need the use permit. Moving on to C2 and this general commercial, and this is probably the predominant commercial district we have in the city, the C2. So again, clarifying that when it's less than 500, well, when it's more than 500 feet, we'll forego the use permit. The top one here, that's just a clarification, drive-through windows and outdoor teller facilities. It was meant for banks, so now we're just clearing it up to actually state that. And here now we're in the use permit section. If you're over 500, if you're under 500 feet, then again, that use permit requirement still remains. So this section that we're proposing is 4.2.18. So these will be development standards that will apply to all drive-through restaurants, whether a use permit is required or not. Some of these, I'd say about half, are existing regulations already. Like the first one, a 500-foot queuing from the first stop. That is a standard that we have today. We just clarified at the current proposal that it's from the first stop 500 feet if you have multiple lanes as well. So it would be a 5-car queue from the first stop for each lane. And then probably another one I should point out, again, most of our standards do prohibit this, but we're going to spell it out very clearly. Queue traffic, you know, we should not block parking stalls, definitely not fire lanes or impede emergency access. So those are things we'll look at during either use permit review or site plan review to ensure that we're maintaining traffic circulation and flow for both pedestrians and vehicles through the center. I also want to point out a new design standard that we're proposing. You've probably seen canopies over drive-through windows. Usually we required those if the drive-through window faced the street. That was something that we would require. Now what we're seeing is a lot of other cities are requiring it just as a matter of fact for any designs. So like the Chipotle tonight, if that came after this was effective, would have to provide a cover and screen over the drive-through window. Okay. And I'll show that in a little bit, kind of what we're proposing. And also a new best practice that we've been finding, that since a lot of these drive-through restaurants are now using people as ordering points, that let's have a safe spot for them, their staff, as they go out to cars and such, so they're not maybe walking through drive-through lanes or through the rock, that we actually have pathways for them. And so these are a couple that have come through, and again, just to show the standard requirement, 5 cars from the first stop. So this is the menu board, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this would be in compliance. This is a double, and so here's the menu boards right here for this facility. And so here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or so, and then even I think 6 or 7 here as well. So again, both of these would meet our requirement for the 5-car queue from the first stop. Then these are some pictures of just kind of what we're looking for now. These are drive-throughs within Goodyear that all had windows facing a street, so they were required to put a cover over them. So now for any drive-through restaurant, this would be the standard requirement. And you can see there's different levels that they've done. You know, this is stucco with some stone columns. These are more like trellises, but again, you can see the common element. They kind of screen the window. They provide screening here along the drive here, just to add another aesthetic element for these uses. Because typically, usually we find this side of the drive-through is very flat, just because it has to be, because that's where the cars are queuing and waiting. So there's really not much architecturally they can do to make these look nice. So adding these canopies does add a little interest to this elevation. So for this text amendment, we did notify, it was a public hearing, so we did provide the legal ad in the newspaper. Our Economic Development Department, they helped us with an e-blast to their users. They have a large inventory of users that, for further information, they put their email in, so we sent out an e-blast to that group, sent it out to the developer forum, a group of developers that, similar kind of situation. They provide their emails and we can send them information and updates. That was on our website as well. And to date, no formal written opposition lodged with the city. However, we have received an informal concern from a potential developer, felt that the queuing requirement that we're proposing was excessive in terms of it being a blanket requirement, that not all drive-through restaurants needed the 5-car queue and potentially 10-car queue if they had a double lane, that it should be looked at more on a case-by-case basis. For our findings and recommendation, what we've proposed tonight, we do think it promotes the direction that the City Council gave us. We believe it furthers the general health, safety, and welfare of the city. That's the main thing one of the main things we look at when we're changing the code. Provides for a more streamlined process. We're focusing still on compatibility because, again, it's 500 feet from residential. If you're less than that, you still need to go through the additional review. And it also provides for enhanced design for drive-through restaurants and incorporates some best practices. So we are recommending approval, and if approved here tonight, the City Council hearing will be April 18th. With that, Mr. Chairman, it concludes my presentation. Available for any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions for staff on this?
I've got a comment.
Go ahead, Vice Chairman.
I just think it's an excellent move forward for our city as we're getting bigger and we're going to have more retail and we'll be expanding further south. And it really helps, I think, the business community get the ball rolling on a lot of things that have in the past perhaps taken a lot of time for them.
Thank you. Yeah, to echo that statement, the staff has always been working hard to streamline things. I know ever since I've been here, there have always been a push to make things easier for clients and easier for the city to expand and do better. So just for my curiosity, what kind of cost and time savings will we look at as a result of passing this new text amendment?
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, thank you. That's a good question. Cost, it's about $1,150 or so for a use permit right now. It's a little higher than that when you factor in. They also have to pay public notice fees that we incur, so maybe $1,600. The biggest saving would be time, because it's probably about 5 to 6 months of just time, but there's also their preparation time of putting together all of these plans like you saw for Chipotle. Someone has to put all that together. There's a cost for the restaurant to hire someone and put all of that together. So there are several months of time that they can save. They also save or gain certainty. So a use permit can always be voted up or down. So if they know it's a principal permitted use, now it's just site planning that they need to go through and check the boxes to make sure they meet our standards.
And then are other cities doing the 500 feet barrier, or are we like right in with other cities what they're doing? Or I was just going to ask why the 500 feet specifically.
Mr. Chairman, as part of our review, the outside counsel did review 10 other cities within the valley. So what he found was every city had a different queuing, a different stacking. Goodyear was and remains more conservative in that approach. So our requirement is probably on the more conservative end. And again, we stayed conservative given the concerns put to us by the city council and that they did not want to see traffic, especially impeding fire lanes and emergency access. So we stayed conservative with that. 500 feet was also selected since that is our requirement for notification. So when we have a public hearing, we notify everybody within 500 feet of the property. So that seemed like a good number to use.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Oh, yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could add just one couple of additional pieces of information to piggyback on the excellent points that Steve made. Just a couple of other things that's beneficial to the city with this change would be sales tax collection. Although we don't chase drive-through restaurants, economic development really doesn't chase drive-through restaurants as a business sector that they recruit from necessarily. The fact is that a typical drive-through restaurant does generate about $10,000 a month in sales tax to the city. So if they open up 6 months sooner, the better for all residents in the city because there's more funding for parks and recreation, police, fire, those type of things. Additionally, when a commercial business opens, and they pull their permits for construction, they pay impact fees. That goes to police, water, parks, streets, and things of that nature as well. So the sooner that, and probably in the nature of a Chipotle or something like that, you're probably looking around $30,000 to $40,000 of impact fees. So the sooner the city collects those, we're able to repurpose those funds and put those to work to build additional streets, fund additional capital expenditures for parks and things of that nature as well. So all those monies, what we receive, flow back to the benefit of the citizenry. So the sooner that we can capitalize on that and pump them back into the city residents, the better for everybody.
Thank you.
Just a little bit of additional information. Again, we don't really go out and necessarily recruit a whole lot of drive-throughs, such as, your typical McDonald's and so on and so forth. Those just kind of happen as these have in the Canyon Trails Target Center, but there is a benefit to the city.
The economics is fascinating. All right. Thank you. Any other questions, concerns? No speaker cards on this matter, and no one in the audience to speak. I will close the public hearing. And may I have a motion and a second for item 22-220-00001?
I motion to approve case 22-220-00001.
I have a motion from Commissioner Hegedus. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a second from a few different commissioners. I think Commissioner Booth. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you so much. We have some business. Item number 6, general plan update from Matt and Michael, INT. That's what's on my.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commission members, we're fortunate tonight. We have Matt Kleisico with Michael Baker. They are the consultant for our general plan update that we've kicked off. So I won't say too much more because Matt's going to go into everything in much better detail, but I'll go ahead and turn the mic over to Matt.
Great. Would you mind helping me? Oh, okay. Perfect. All right. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Chair and fellow commissioners. It's great to be here tonight to talk a little bit about something very important for the community, we think overall, a multi-year project, and that is updating the general plan. What my goal for this evening is really to just give a broad overview of what the general plan process is all about. But at the conclusion of my opening comments, I'd also like to jump into a short exercise to pose some questions to the commission to kind of get some feedback from you that we can build into the process as we ramp up and start getting this out into the community and start having some community events and activities to solicit input. I should back up and say that I'm supported with a great team for this effort. Michael Baker International is a multidisciplinary firm that we've done general plans and area plans and zoning codes throughout Arizona. We have offices across the country, but our Phoenix office has over 60 staff. And so we were very excited to be able to work on this project, and along with our team, Kimley Horn will be assisting us, and they are another engineering firm within the Valley that will be focusing on transportation and parks and recreation. So you may be aware that Kimley Horn is actually assisting the city on their Parks and Recreation Master Plan update. So I think there's some really good synergy there that while we'll be doing this general plan update, we'll also be able to be in alignment with some of the other efforts that the community is going through right now. We're also joined by Small Giants. They are a graphic design and communication firm, so they'll be helping us with a lot of the collateral and outreach material. So we have this team has collaborated on multiple general plans in the past, so we're happy to kind of take that synergy and momentum and assist Goodyear through this effort. We'll go to the next slide. So certainly I recognize that the commission is well aware of what a general plan is, but it might be beneficial just to have a little refresher on why are we doing this today and what are some of the state statute nuances that go into this process that we need to be mindful of. So certainly the first item, first and foremost, would be state statute requires that we update the general plan every 10 years. So through that update process, you also have to go through and get the plan ratified by voters. So one of the key reasons that we'll be going through this effort is to meet state statute. But beyond just addressing state statute, it is good practice to continuously, just as we heard about looking at the zoning code, is to go back and look at the general plan to see if it's addressing the issues and priorities that the community feels is most important. And certainly after 10 years, things change, and that's a good period to take a look at that. We all know that the general plan is just that. It's a general guiding document. It is not the zoning code. It is not a specific area plan. So it's that broad framework that is, as many call it, the blueprint that guides the community. So it really establishes policies that the commission or council will use to then make decisions about zoning code issues or other decisions within the community. So that's one of the things that we like to focus on, is that this general plan, while it's a long-range document, it's being used to make decisions in the near term. So we have to be very sensitive to the fact that, yes, we're looking down the road, but we never know how quickly those things will come to us, right? Sometimes we think that might be 10 years down the road, and it happens much sooner than we expect. So that's why we're very excited to assist the city in this effort, because we can get into the plan and help kind of recalibrate and see what things have we accomplished, what things do we want to add to the list, and make sure that we continue the great work that the city is doing. So with that process, you'll see on the right-hand side of the slide, required elements. So state statute has specific elements or topics that every general plan must address based off the size of your community. So, as you can imagine, as communities get larger, you are required to address more elements within the general plan. Based on the size of Goodyear, the city generally almost has to address almost all elements or topics that state statute requires. So you can see the list there that the current general plan addresses land use, circulation, growth areas, open space, revitalization, neighborhood preservation, environmental planning, water conservation, conservation overall, which is more from an environmental standpoint, energy, public services, public buildings, housing, safety, and cost of development. So we're really covering all bases. But what's great about Goodyear is that doesn't mean that you can't elect to also look at other topics that are important or unique for your particular community. And so the current general plan actually has some elective elements that we expect to continue forward. And that would be economic development and workforce, arts and culture, apologize for the duplicate there, education, healthy communities, social services, technology, and tourism. And so that's very encouraging to us as a firm that does general plans for a lot of different communities across the state. It's always very informative and telling to us when we see what elective elements communities decide to move forward with. It really starts to help paint a picture of what's important to those communities. So this was very encouraging to us to see how robust the elective elements are. We'll go to the next slide. So this is a very generalized, I mean, we certainly have a much more detailed and specific schedule for the project, but I like to use this graphic to kind of show overall how this whole process plays out. And so the way we approach it is really predicated on 3 distinct phases, and that is the recognize phase, the enrich phase, and the achieve phase. And then you see within each of those phases, engagement is that final phase that is entwined throughout this process. And so you can also see that this process is spanned over a very long period of time. We kicked this effort off in terms of working with city staff to get the project up and going back in January, and we're just through the end of this month getting through our first phase of kind of looking at the existing conditions within the community. But you see over the timeline that this project is looking to take the general plan to voters all the way out in May of 2024. So you might ask yourself, wow, that's quite a long timeline. And one of the things that I always like to remind everyone is there's a couple nuances to that. One of them being that in order to get this on the ballot, we actually have to provide 150-day notice to the county to allow them time to prepare and get it on the actual ballot. So right up front, there's a 5-month period there where there is no work. We actually have to have the plan approved so that we can then get this to the county and then they work to get it on the ballot. So 5 months of that timeline, there is no work. It's just putting it on the ballot. Also within this is the 60-day review process, and that is a 2-month process that is required by state statute, where once the plan is drafted, we put it down and release it out into the community, and as I like to say, let it marinate. We let everyone kind of look it over, beat it up, and then through that feedback, we work to refine it. So when you're looking at the timeline and considering it overall, I just like to kind of put those 2 nuances out there that not all that time is generated or utilized for specific work. Some of it is procedural. But if I could jump back into the process just to give you an outline of some of the specific steps within each phase. So as I mentioned, the recognize phase, we're coming up on kind of concluding that at the end of this month. But in that phase, we had a kickoff summit with Goodyear staff, so senior staff. We went through a similar presentation with them to get some feedback. And then we're also taking forward, we prepared and are now taking forward a public participation plan. That is required as part of state statute. So we must prepare a plan that details how we're going to engage with the public and how we're going to inform them throughout the whole process. And so then we take that plan forward to council for them to approve that. And then within this effort, we're also establishing a general plan working group. And so that working group is just as it sounds. They're going to be a select members of the community that council will help identify and select. But within that working group, we'll utilize those residents or stakeholders within the community to meet frequently to go over all of the work that we're doing in the general plan. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of review and decision making. And so that working group is going to be the sounding board for the project as we move along. And then we're looking at on April 28th, we're scheduled to have our first community outreach meeting. So at the end of this month, we'll be really starting to do the public rollout of this general plan. So that's when you'll start to see it pop up in social media postings, on websites, and other areas within the community. And then last, within the recognized phase, we're currently working on a community baseline assessment. So another way of just saying an existing conditions report. So one of the things that informs the process over the life of the effort is this community baseline assessment. So in that report, we look at what has changed and where the community is today compared to where we were 10 years ago. And so that pulls census data, that pulls data from MAG, that looks at any area plans that Goodyear has, as well as external plans that might impact Goodyear. And so all of that is captured in a very robust assessment, and then that is shared with the community to help inform decision-making as we move along. So from that effort, we then move into the Enrich Phase. And the Enrich Phase is where we really put pen to paper, where we really start drafting the plan. So one of the first steps we do for that effort is look at the overall organization of the plan. So how are we actually going to structure the plan in order to make it user-friendly? And sometimes you might kind of overlook that, but that's very critical decision point in the process in order to help the general public follow along and navigate the plan in a very intuitive way. We don't want to make this difficult for any resident, whether they've lived here a long time or are new to the community, to pick this up and quickly see what is Goodyear all about. So from that, once we have the structure, then we can start getting into all those individual elements. And so we take those elements down in chunks, in different phases or increments, and we draft or update those sections. So that's where we start looking at, are there policies that need to be removed because they're not working or doing what we thought they would do? Are there specific goals that we need to refine that the community has achieved, and so now we need to set new ones? Or do we want to carry forward a goal because it's something that is a mainstay and defines our community? So as you can imagine, this is a very important point in the project. And so that's why you'll see the general plan working group will be meeting with them upwards of 7 times in this time frame. But what I'd like to focus on more importantly is the second part there, work sessions. And that's where the Planning Commission and Council come in. We have structured up to 4 work sessions during that period that we would be coming back before you to keep you informed of how the process is going and what we've been working on with the working group. So we certainly want to keep the commission informed through the process, but we want to use your time appropriately and selectively because we know you have a lot of responsibilities with all the other projects that are coming through the city. So that's where you'll be specifically engaged as one unified body, but you're all residents, so we would certainly encourage and hope that you engage at some of our community outreach events and or share with your neighbors and friends to help get the word out. And then at the conclusion of the Enrich Phase, we then get into that 60-day review process where, as I mentioned, statute requires that we provide this general plan to specific agencies, whether that be a state agency or adjacent communities. So the plan gets sent out not only to the community overall, but it gets sent to our neighbors. Then it also gets sent to Maricopa County, for example. It gets sent to ADOT and the school districts and any other agencies that are important to Goodyear, to give them the opportunity to see how that aligns with their planning to make sure everything's copacetic. And then we make any adjustments to the plan based off the feedback we receive from that 60-day review. That faults us into the achieve phase, where we actually finalize the document. We have our final working group and work sessions with commission and council to share with you, this is what we heard through the 60-day review process. These are the amendments we made based off that feedback, and then really prime the pump in terms of getting into that formal adoption process. So the goal is to not just dump a general plan on you at the end of this and say, please read it and let's talk about it next time and approve it. So we really want to bring you along the process and feed things to the commission in small increments so that when we get to the end, everything looks familiar and we're not assigning, one big homework assignment. And then from there, as I mentioned, commission provides a recommendation to council, then council adopts the general plan. And then once they adopt it, then that 150-day notice period begins, and we hopefully place it on the May 2024 ballot. And then we will be required, obviously, to have a majority vote on the general plan for it to become ratified and active for the city. Any questions? This is a lot on this slide. Maybe I'll pause here to see if there's any questions about the process overall.
I have a question.
Sure.
In terms of the work group, is it fully staffed now, already established, or is there opportunities for others to be included? Or?
And actually, I don't know if Steve wants to jump in as well, but the working group has not been finalized at this point. So we're looking to go before council to discuss the working group and get their feedback on how the structure of that group will be comprised of. So I think there certainly would be opportunity to approach that discussion. Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks, Matt. Mr. Chairman, Commission members, yes, just to add on to what Matt said, the General Plan Committee, that'll go before Council April 18th. So that's the date we're hoping. We're also going to be taking to them the adoption of the public participation plan that Matt was talking about. So actually 2 items will go before Council on the 18th. Right now we're envisioning the draft bylaws, about 15 members of the working group. So we'll be soliciting once hopefully everything goes well at council. It'll go through likely a similar format to many of you went through to get appointed to the commission. It'll be a council appointments.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Any other comments before we move forward? All right, hearing none. So we'll go to the next slide. So what I like to jump into here is kind of set the scene, if you will, to lead into some questions I'd like to pose to the commission to, as I mentioned in my opening comments, get some of your initial thoughts that we can hopefully build into the process at this early stage. So to do that, one of the things we like to say and to talk about is certainly the general plan looks at where are we today. And, we can look around the city and see some really great things, some things that are exciting and tell us a lot about the community. We're one of the fastest growing cities in the nation. The Money Magazine identifies us as one of the best places to live. 95% of residents rate Goodyear as excellent to good place to live in the community survey, satisfaction survey. And you can see some of the other factors there. We have a lot of room to grow still, so there's potential, but all of the signs are indicating that Goodyear's heading in the right direction when you land on all these lists. And everybody knows we all love lists. You go on the internet and everything's in a list. So this is great. This is all things that Goodyear should pat themselves on the back about, and things that we need to be sensitive to and make sure that we build on that, right? So that's important to keep those successes in perspective so that we don't, deviate from them. But beyond looking at today, we go to the next slide. We certainly want to talk about what are the trends that may shape our future within this community. And so that's where we really need to start pressing ourselves to think down the line and in the future about where we might be or where we want to be. And sometimes we have a very clear vision of what that is, and then sometimes we're not totally sure what may come of it, but it's worth having the conversation about what are the things that we think Goodyear or the valley overall is going to have to address in the near term, so that we ensure that the general plan is guiding us in the right direction. So, we hear those terms, smart cities, and all the things that go into that. And so we're looking at, how is the community interconnected? And so that's not only how we're interconnected through transportation, but how we're interconnected through our infrastructure and how that is shared with residents, and so how we can do things more efficiently, all build into that. We also look at resiliency. Every state looks at resiliency different. If I'm on the coast, resiliency might factor in sea level rise, but we're in the Sonoran Desert, and so water is very important to us. And so, having conversations about water resources is going to be important. The Internet of Things and e-commerce. The pandemic really just fast forwarded us in terms of e-commerce, but how is that going to reshape how cities function in the future, and how we shop? And we were talking about wanting more retail, and what does that retail look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Connected and autonomous vehicles. We're in Arizona. It's one of the epicenters, right, of autonomous vehicles. I'm sure you've driven around the valley and seen cars being tested all over the place. And so it's very exciting to see that, but then we start asking ourselves, what might the plan need to accommodate those types or that type of technology? Looking at the changes in our demographics, we had a great conversation with staff and talked about how, 10 years ago, maybe Goodyear was looking at itself as a family-oriented community. And then now we're starting to see, no, we're an all-inclusive community. We're not just families. We have young professionals. We have retired members of our community. And so what does that mean in terms of the development patterns and fabric of our community? And then certainly we want to align the general plan with other efforts in the community. So we have the community strategic plan and how that plan talks about wanting to be a regional destination. Well, what does that mean? And let's build that into the general plan. And then certainly housing. So as we talk about demographic changes we've seen in the valley and the state, our housing challenges in terms of affordability and availability. And so how do we diversify our housing stock, and then what does that look like so that we end up with a high quality community that provides a healthy lifestyle, right? So those are all things I just kind of like to throw out there in terms of getting everyone thinking, and maybe in a nerdy planner way, excited about the general plan. But one of the things I'll say is that this information really helps us, if you want to go to the next slide, Steve, get into this exercise that I wanted to, not spend all this time talking. I'd really love to use some of our time this evening to hear your thoughts and feedback. And so one of the broad questions that I'd like to ask is, what topics are most important to Goodyear in the next 10 or 20 years?
Well, one topic that kind of covers multiple, if you go back one slide, with e-commerce, autonomous vehicles, the fact that we're only 12% built out, the fact that more employers are coming here, housing is going to increase. One topic that kind of hits all those is traffic. We're building new highways in Goodyear. There's going to be more opportunities for traffic. The city is just going to continue to get bigger. I think traffic, I was thinking with electric cars, e-commerce, there's going to be more Amazon vehicles out there. There's going to be more FedEx vehicles, and we're bringing more of those companies to Goodyear that send more trucking out into Goodyear. I think traffic should maybe added to the elective section for our, or if it's already under like safety or public safety.
That's a fantastic perspective in terms of understanding how a lot of these things are interconnected, right? And I loved your observation about how if we are successful in achieving all these things, one of the outproducts is traffic. And so mobility and active transportation is often synonymous with managing traffic. And so that is something that we'll be addressing within the circulation element that's required of the general plan. But it is something that we can maybe look at a finer degree, because certainly that element is geared towards more of the framework and the system itself. So what type of roads, where are they going? What are the facilities supporting in terms of mobility types? But pondering and looking at traffic at a more specific level is something that we can certainly keep at the forefront of our mind and see how we might consider how we incorporate that specifically for some of the conditions that are unique to Goodyear. Because to your point, traffic will be an issue, but we also have some pretty major facilities that are planned but haven't been built yet. And so that is another nuance, right, of timing and when things come to the development, come up through the development process. So I really like that thought. Any other thoughts or ideas? I know I'm kind of catching you guys cold, but just know, it's not going to marry us to anything, but if there is anything that jumped out at you that you think is important to Goodyear that we focus on in the next 10 years or 20 years, we'd love to hear it.
One of the things that I've noticed is that we get a lot of sunlight. So besides the water conservation, I think that we're going to get more, there's a lot of apartments being built in right now. So we got more people, so we're going to be using more water. So water conservation is one of the I think it's going to be a key. And also, what about utilize the energy? Let's say, for example, like solar energy. I'm surprised to see that we don't have that many. Because quite frankly, Arizona is not the #1 state that utilize solar energy. So what about here? Is this something that we can maybe incorporate, perhaps encourage people, maybe the city can do something about it, because that may perhaps help since we are growing, it's only 12% build out. So we're going to be more people come in, more businesses. That means we're going to be using more energy. So is this something that perhaps we can look into it?
Yeah, so really, I hear the notion of how can we be, proactive instead of reactive, and not get to this development point in time and then try to work some sustainability measures into the community, but really build those in to the plan overall, so that we're not trying to wedge it in later on in the process. So we'll certainly take that into consideration and see how we might play that forward as we go through the process. Great feedback. Thank you.
I would also say in terms of economic development and job growth, I think that actually goes well with the fact that you want an educated workforce. You want to find ways, especially with having a 9-year-old, you want more education when our kids, when they go out into the world, whether they go and find a trade or they go to college, you want them to hopefully consider this city as an option to work and to live in. So you want job growth, but you also want to educate our students, and find ways for them to be able to live and work in Goodyear by strengthening not only our job growth, but also finding ways to educate our children better.
That's fantastic. Having a 9-year-old myself as well, I really like that notion of recognizing that, we want this to be a community where our children want to come back. They might go away to college, but we want them to enjoy growing up in Goodyear and coming back here to raise their family. And that's where you start to build culture and a foundation within a community. So I love that thought.
Because I was born and raised in Michigan, in Detroit, specifically. And so my mother and father, they come out here every year and they see the growth, and they're just, one of the first things they say is, this is new, or, this is that. So I think that as a city, we are growing so rapidly, and we're seeing it. We're seeing where we can be. So, my opinion is just that as long as we continue to move forward and find ways to improve, we'll be fine in the future.
Well, that might be, I don't want to, if anyone else had a comment, I don't want to cut them off. Yes.
So as far as the regional destination, I'd like to see us focus more on arts and entertainment out this way. So it seems like if we got to go to a play or a concert or something, then it can be quite a distance, if we're going to Gamage, or I'd like to see more of those things potentially coming out this way. I know we're only 12% built out, so there's a lot of room for growth.
Sure.
But I'd like that to be in our plan.
Yeah, Goodyear has, the West Valley is the next East Valley, right? In terms of we're already seeing it, but it has great potential, and Goodyear has every ability to be the primary community in the West Valley, right? In terms of culture and providing opportunities for recreational as well as community-sponsored type of events. So it's encouraging to see that was an elective element in the current general plan, because it isn't always the case, and to hear that there's support for that is beneficial.
Just to piggyback off of the conservation idea, I think we have to take a look at the opportunity for incentivizing electric charging stations throughout the city. I think electric cars are here to stay. I don't think they're going anywhere. And more of them are going to be here. And we incentivize builders in certain ways and how to get them involved with doing different streetscapes, and maybe we could do the same thing with commercial or even multifamily to offer. I know a few multifamily have charging stations, but more of them are more centralized charging stations that anybody could be a part of and use.
Yeah, there's some exciting things that are occurring in other communities relative to supporting electric vehicles. So I think that is certainly something that we want to explore. How that plays out in Goodyear, we'll see. But I think it certainly is responsible of us to look into that, because it is obviously so prevalent in terms of the technology and how it's going to kind of change our communities in the future. So it's encouraging to hear that you have some support for that as well.
I'd like to add, to me, all these things are great. But that third bullet, to have a safe community, you got to be healthy. And that just screams to me. How do we keep our kids healthy? Not just physically, but mentally supported. Pandemic opened up a lot of new opportunities in terms of stress and depression. And so I'd like to see us give some focus on keeping our community safe and healthy.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we like to kind of note is health in all policy, right? Is this notion that we don't have to just look at a healthy program, that how can we build health into the general plan overall, that there's all aspects of the community that impact our health. And so it doesn't have to just be one chapter that talks about health. It could be pulled into the general plan in many different ways. So, so what's interesting is as we were discussing these, we actually started to touch on almost all of these bullet points. And so what I'm encouraged about is it wasn't necessarily a test, but it shows that we're starting to recognize everything's interconnected here, and that it's really not necessarily in many instances picking a winner and a loser, but recognizing all of these things have to work really well together in order for us to reach the goals that we want to achieve. So that's what we're here, hopefully, to help facilitate that effort. I think that was some really great feedback. And if I could jump to the next slide, Steve, and we'll refine that a little bit. I know there's some overlap here, but what major image, attribute, or issue should the general plan preserve, enhance, or emphasize? So I know we really touched on all of these in our comments. So we talked about being family-oriented, needing a safe community, and providing premier education. We touched on sustainability, and then promoting economic development. So maybe rather than just revisit some of those, what about quality design? We talked a little bit about drive-throughs this evening. Is design very, important? Do we see certain types of development in the community that we think we'd like to kind of encourage more enhanced design, or is it a more universal that we just need to be mindful of it overall?
I think having quality design overall, but with variety within the city. We don't want cookie cutters on every, lot, which is why I think that vibrant design for the one we approved, or vibrant colors, is a pretty good idea. If each community can have their own personality and as when maintaining the quality there, I think that's part of our job when we approve these designs too.
That's great. I mean, one of the things you sparked in my mind is, often we see some of the most authentic places that we enjoy visiting got that way because they did it organically, right? That it was, and sometimes it's by accident. The relationship of two uses next to each other created a great outdoor space, or the funky design of a building created a iconic landmark in the community. And so I really liked your observation about how we need to still give that room, right, for creativity, and not create some level of policy that would create a monotonous type of impact, but also make sure that we have some certainty here that, hey, we have a certain standard that we want to uphold, and so can we have policies that ensure that projects meet that expectation? So great feedback.
Goodyear does offer a unique challenge to developers because we do have such different sections of Goodyear that really stand out. For example, Stray Mountain Ranch is very nature oriented, and you want the houses to blend in with nature. You wouldn't put a recreation campus with green and yellow, and that thing would stand out like a sore thumb. So Stray Mountain Ranch, more oriented to nature and keeping the landscape the same, where downtown Goodyear and the the city center or by the ballpark, you have very much more vibrant colors and more modern lands like buildings. Then you have Pebble Creek, which it has its own personality, and so there's so many different pockets of Goodyear that are unique. You have the west side of Goodyear in the Cotton Lane corridor that has a more farming vibe, which I think is really neat. So having all of those pockets represented well is a challenge, but Goodyear is doing an amazing job with it. It's fantastic.
So there you go, touching on another aspect that the general plan, I think, was very sensitive to, and so we'll look at how we may want to refine it or carry it forward. But the plan right now does divide the community up in different sections, and so maybe that is something we want to continue to explore to recognize the nuances of those different parts of the community, and that some policies are not necessarily most applicable in all aspects. So that's very helpful feedback. Thank you. Well, moving to the last slide then in question for the evening. I don't want to keep you here all night. But this is one last one that starts to get a little more specific in terms of what physical places or features in Goodyear offer opportunities for improvement or enhancement. So that list is just there to kind of get your thoughts going. But is there any areas in the community that either exist or are planned that we think, that is the first domino that needs to fall, or that is something we need to be very focused on because it's going to impact our community in a significant way? We'd love feedback from the commission in order to make sure that we come forward at a later date with proper goals and policies to align with your expectations.
I like the airport piece. My understanding is that landing strip is probably the second largest in the valley. With Sky Harbor kind of landlocked and all the people moving here and coming back and forth, or like we said, let this be a place where people come. I see that airport as a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, looking at that, another way of saying it, many communities are jealous of having a facility like that. So I would agree with you that there's some great opportunity there, and so something that we'll definitely be mindful of as we go through the planning process.
I think the Loop 303, State Route 30, to kind of piggyback on my previous traffic, is once that is completely understood and how that conceptualizes, a lot of other things can fall into place along there in regards to zoning along State Route 30, along with what is going to be developed around Loop 303 and what the vision is for traffic along those places, and because that's going to be it's going to change the city in a lot of ways, and it could be for the much better. I mean, 202 going through through the Indian Res and around that area changed traffic dramatically, getting to Chandler in that area, Mesa. I mean, this could have a similar impact on that.
Well said, and I think that is something that staff also contemplated, because as part of this update effort, the land use plan is always synonymous with the general plan. Almost more people, when you say general plan, they think of the land use map than anything else. And that making modifications to that land use plan is something that's going to be contemplated as part of this process. And it's one of the things is looking at those corridors and seeing if land uses need to adjust or change within those corridors. So I certainly expect we'll be before you kind of talking about that in more detail as we move along in the process. Any other thoughts before we wrap it up? This was great feedback. I appreciate all of the insightful input. As I mentioned, we're going to be really inundating the community with a lot of opportunities to get feedback, but we're going to try and do it in a creative way, in the sense of we don't want to overwhelm the community. Goodyear has been doing a great job of surveying residents, so we don't want them to get fatigued and ask them the same questions over and over again. So we're going to be very, as I like to say, surgical in how we get out into the community, but you'll see, hopefully, as the process moves along, how through our outreach efforts, we're going to start touching some of the comments that you made here tonight. So we look forward to not only working with you in our future work sessions, but hopefully engaging with you at some of our outreach efforts. But if we want to go to the last slide, I'll just close on next steps, just for your benefit in the near term. As Steve mentioned, we have our public outreach plan and the general plan working group discussion for council on 4/18. And then from that 4/18 up to our first community workshop on 4/28 is when we'll really start rolling out the notice within the community. So those are the key first steps. And if there's any suggestions you may have about how we should engage with the community, or what works really well, we're all ears. So feel free to reach out to Steve. Steve is, I guess we should say, the point person in terms of assisting us from a staff perspective. So if you want to share thoughts or ideas, I'm sure you can send them to Steve and he'll pass them on to us. But we'll be again before you and can talk about that as well. So again, thanks for the time tonight. And we look forward to really assisting Goodyear and continuing all the great work you guys are doing. It's really commendable. About my boss or colleague, Kevin Kugler, used to work for the city of Goodyear many moons ago. And so he is very excited to be able, I keep saying very, but he is equally interested in having seen where Goodyear was, in prior to the Great Recession, seeing how much Goodyear grew, and now we're at another phase in that trajectory. So all good things to come. And that's it.
Thank you so much, and we look forward to working with you. Awesome.
Thank you.
Just, Steve, one more time, if anybody would like to join that the council review, will there be an application on Goodyear's website, or how would they show their interest?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we'll have a web presence. There's also some folks we're going to solicit too as well, that we've been collecting, folks who applied for, let's say, the commission, but were not selected to move forward. Those will definitely be people we'll be reaching out to.
Excellent. Thank you. Next up, staff communications.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to piggyback on the general plan and sort of the importance of it, it is a living, breathing document that we use almost on a daily basis. This isn't something that just goes up on the shelf that collects dust. We benchmark all of our zoning change recommendations are benchmarked to the general plan as well. So it's a super important document, and the engagement from the community is really, really critical to make sure that we nail what people want to have happen in the future for Goodyear. So this is a very exciting time. It's Michael said, kind of planning nerds, and yes, this general plans kind of get all of us planners a little bit nerdy, I guess. Maybe some more than others, but I won't call anybody out, right, Steve? but really it is an important document, and you all joined the commission at an exceptional time with all of the growth that's going on in the city, but also creating a new general plan that's going to help guide us for the next 10 years. So we really look forward to your contributions and input, and feel free to reach out to Steve. He is the lead on this from the staff perspective, as Michael alluded to. So thank you for your input tonight and your future input, because this is not your only bite at the apple, I'm going to say. With that, just a couple things, and then Alyssa has some stuff that she would like to go over with the commission too. But this is my opportunity just to read out and report for the cases that you voted on at the last meeting. If you remember, we had the rezoning for 10303 Business Park up in the northern part of the city on the west side of Cotton Lane, kind of behind Sub-Zero and all that stuff over there. That on all these cases cascaded to the March 28th council meeting. There was some discussion about the building orientation and the amount of trucks and noise and things of that nature with the adjoining neighborhood, but council did approve it. I think it was unanimously. They unanimously approved it. The Anton at Ballpark Village, the property that Christian pointed out in his presentation tonight in regards to the Fulton project. That was likewise also approved by council. The RPS Indian School, which is a multifamily project that was a sort of an infill piece that had a parcel of property that had been zoned C2 for a long time, 10 plus years. That was approved by council. The rezoning to facilitate the additions and so forth for Thompson Funeral Home was approved. The Starbucks at Canyon Trails Town Center was approved. And the sign package for Australia Commons was likewise approved. So everything, we had some debate at council, but it was good, healthy debate and some questions. So we thank you for your interest in that and making your recommendations. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Alyssa if you'll indulge her for just a minute. She did just get back from vacation, so we're all curious of what she's going to say.
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm not going to talk about my vacation. Don't worry. Just to let you know, you should be receiving some communication from the city clerk's office soon. They are planning a open meeting law and ethics training that is mandatory for all commissioners. And that is planned for June 21st, tentatively. So giving you that date now, though, so that you can hopefully get that worked out, at the Goodyear Recreation Campus at 6 p.m. She does state it is a mandatory training. They're hoping to get the majority of members at that. There also will be a makeup session if you're not able to go to that, so it's not the end of the world. But yeah, that's all I had.
All right. Next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting will be held May 11th at 6 p.m. in this very courtroom. There being no further business to discuss, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.